Hey everyone, and welcome back to Odyssey 40k. I have another interview for you today, and I have Olly from Team Australia. He is the Team Australia coach, and this interview is going to be all about talking about coaching at WTC. How are you doing, Olly?
I'm doing really good, Chris. Thanks for having me on.
Sweet. So, how was, just as a blanket statement, how did you become a coach for Team Australia?
So I think it all sort of started with 2023.
Okay.
I had applied to be on a coach for that team.
Yep.
Unfortunately, I obviously wasn't successful in that. But sort of putting my hand up and putting that interest made me have good friends and connections
Yep.
with their coaching staff, with their players. I talked to them all, helped a little bit in their sort of preparations.
Sure.
Before they flew off, and sort of just kept up that repertoire, and then came in to apply for 2024 and was thankfully selected.
Nice. Excellent. So did you just apply to play, and then did you decide to be a coach, or how did that work?
So I applied for both.
Yep.
For this, and I sort of led with a lot of like experience of why I was a good player and all that, but then also sort of why I would be a good coach and sort of those developmental skills. The coaching, I leaned a lot on personal work of, helping junior developers and managing teams and all that sort of stuff. And I did have a lot of conversations with the team going, if we picked you as a coach, would you be resentful for not being a player? And that sort of thing, as I think any team would be worried by that. But I think I put aside, made people put at ease that if I was a coach, I'm a coach. Yeah, and I'm there to do that role.
Yeah, very funny. That's very similar. I applied for both as well. I played for player and coach, and then Finn called me the day after I sent my application. He's like, "Would you be would you be keen for both?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Are you sure? Like, don't talk crap right now.
Yeah.
Will you actually be keen to come as a coach?" It's like 100%. I am down as a coach. And then it kind of led later on. It was like, actually, I think I'm actually better positioned to be a coach this coming year. So I think fairly similar kind of.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot of people will have the anxiety where if you do a player and I'm a player and a coach, they're like, are you just trying to get on the team? And you're not actually wanting to embrace that coach role where it is quite different and it has a lot of responsibility that it's not just, you can't just stand there and just be a guy. I'm just a part of it. It's it's its own role, and there's a reason every team that can get coaches, it gets coaches.
Yes, and tries to get good coaches, right? I think that's a really important thing.
Absolutely.
So talking about the responsibilities of coaching then, before the event, before you even leave, before lists are even submitted, what kind of responsibilities did you have?
So I think one of the main ones I provided was doing sort of data gathering.
Okay.
Was looking at tournaments.
Yep.
Looking at how, excuse me, other teams when Pirate Cup is going on, when the team the USA team championship is going, what are people bringing in? You always look at it at the lens of they're probably not bringing their actual lists or their full lineup, but you can sort of see what is performing well. Every team is suddenly taking Blood Angels. Blood Angels is performing very well.
Yes.
We can probably expect that.
Yeah.
I think other roles that I provided was also trying to be knowledge gap in the sense of no one on the team played Votan, and only one other player played Admech. So I tried to be the soundboard there of what is a Votan list doing, helping what Admech can potentially do.
Yeah.
And then for me personally, tried to always be a soundboard for players. When people put up lists, it's going, I don't know everyone's army and I trust the players, but it's why have you taken this? Or can you explain to me why you decided to action not something else?
Yeah.
All the players have their good justifications and their experience and all that, but I always think it's very helpful so that everyone is across why they're making these sort of decisions.
It is really funny, and I agree with that. Just critiquing choices in a list, why'd you take that second unit of scouts? Do you actually need it? And or actually it could be this or something so you just start the communication, and then it could end up going back to the same point, but just making sure every unit, every selection, every detachment, every enhancement, do you actually need that enhancement, or could you upgrade that scout unit to something else. I'm using scouts a lot here, but
Yeah, no,
yeah,
100%, right? It's the, hey, so this is what everyone is taking on the meta. You swapped out a key components. Like why is that?
yeah,
Yeah, I 100% agree. And it's not an accusatory matter. It's just a questioning of like, yeah, so like that sort of flow.
yeah. And because like the other people on your team are usually your friends as well, you can be like, oh, like, is it really good? Is it? You know, so
Yeah.
but no, I think it is actually a really important like piece. Is like, well, especially I think. Especially for you, being that soundboard for the Votan and AdMech, like those are two somewhat like newer and more niche armies. So having someone that's like competitive and being able to play both of those, I think is actually like a really important thing to have, and like be able to test into a strong opponent in these lists. Like often you're like, oh, I'll get a rep into Votan, and it's just some random guy at your local club. It's like, well, you're not actually getting a good game in.
Yes, the different like those sort of niche armies can make, right? It's like, cool, you can just play your local guy that's on Votan, but if they're not on the highest caliber, it's like very different experiences,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And I think it was very important this year because we actually saw Votan. Like, I think, across WTC, we saw just so many factions.
Yeah.
That was really good. That it's like, okay, this is like, this comes from 2023, where I'm like, hey guys, anyone need help with Votan? I'm there, and then no one brought Votan, and I'm like, guys, I'll just be sitting back here. I'm like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, no, it's very true, and like sometimes that is the case, right? Like I mainly play Tau, and luckily I got a lot of practice because even in our pod, like Team New Zealand's pod, we had two opposing Tau players. Like cool, so I got all the reps in the world because people wanted to play into those lists. So like, but yeah, I could see if there was no Tau, I probably would have gotten 0 games in, or I would have been the caddy for another list, right? So it's just luck of the draw. Like depends on what you play, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. No, cool. Oh, awesome. So that's before. So then get on to how was the travel over? Obviously, Team Australia very similar to Team New Zealand. We travel an incredibly long way to get to Europe and Michelin, where it is. Where it was hosted this year. So how was the travel? Did you go over as an entire team, or did you go over individually?
So we went over mostly as a team.
Yep.
So a week before, because Australia is so large.
Sure.
A week before, everyone came to Matt Morosoli's house.
Oh, yep.
Melbourne.
Yep.
I think we were missing Jeremy, who had to go to Sydney for like family obligations, so he was traveling by himself.
Yep.
Basically, most of the team, people who didn't live in Victoria, stayed at Soli's house. That's where we scrimmed for like the week, practicing, doing all that for lunch, and then we all left. I found out this during the week. We all left at basically the same time on Friday p.m.
Okay.
However, Dean, Adam, Matt, and myself flew Singapore Airlines.
Okay.
Everyone else was on like Qatar.
Sure. Yeah.
So we arrived at basically the same time. We left at basically the same time, but just very different flights.
Sure.
So sort of all together as a team, just not exactly on the same plane.
Yeah. So that was just like cost of flights fluctuate, right? So something like, oh, we'll get on these flights when they're this price, and then later on these flights.
Yeah, pretty much that. And as you would know, awful flying. Like 8 hours to Singapore, and then 14 hours there, and then unfortunately for the guys, the Qatar Airways is the reverse. They do like a 13-hour flight there, then it's like 8 hours from like Dubai or so forth to Brussels, and it's just not a great time.
Yeah, I did the Qatar flight as well, but I flew Auckland to Qatar, so it was 17 hours, I think, the first flight, and it was hellish. So yeah, it was a rough biscuit, but
yeah, absolutely.
No, okay. So, but you all got there together. Did you all meet up in Brussels, or did you all meet in at Michelin where the?
So we all met up at the hotel because I think the Qatar flight was delayed ever so slightly. So it's like we could wait at the airport for an hour, or we could just go to the airport. So we went to the airport. We sorted our stuff out, and then
nice. So you get to the hotel. Yep. Nice.
very soon everyone
Yeah,
arrived.
yeah. No, I ended up arriving because so the rest of the team basically flew together. I flew out a little bit early. Again, it was just because of flight costs. And yeah, I ended up just sitting
Yeah.
in the airport for 3 hours because I was like, I don't want to go there by myself. So like, I'll just sit here. I ended up being
Yeah.
able to do some like work emails and stuff. But I was just like, this is interesting. But awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I'm very thankful that we had like at least like
Yeah.
groups. Like it was like 4 of us here, like 6 of us over there.
Nice.
Like yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so then you get to your hotel, and then that would have been the Saturday night, and Tuesday is the start of the whole event. So what did you do for those few days, like specifically as a coach? Obviously, you would have done some touristy stuff and stuff like that, but like as a coach, what kind of things were you doing prep-wise before the event?
So prep wise before the event, I think it was more just checking, like dealing with jet lag, but just like we've got all the stuff. Like we brought a bunch of food across as like little platters
Nice.
and all that, so it's making sure like that all made it in one
Yep.
piece. And then it was sort of just making sure we had like the maps, the missions, like all the like little like map layouts and all
Sure.
that was order.
Yep.
But for the most part, it was pretty relaxing. I
Yep.
think everyone was like, "Look, we've got War Masters ahead of it," so sort of everyone just relaxed. We're like, "We're going to go into War Masters," and I think a lot of the actual prep was left to the Thursday morning.
Sure.
Obviously, like I didn't expect to play in like the finals of War Masters.
Yeah. Well
I
done.
was maybe I would be playing on that Thursday, but I think everyone was sort of the idea of we're going to have Thursday morning and early afternoon to actually do all of the prep work
Okay.
that day,
Yep.
so we can just sort of relax and just enjoy like here, like because we did a lot of prep work leading up to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. So you front loaded a bunch of the work, so you didn't have to worry about it as much when you actually got there. You could focus on playing at War Masters, which is the GT before WTC actually starts, and then do your final touches that Thursday morning, since it doesn't start till the Thursday after, or Thursday evening. Yep.
Yeah,
Nice.
absolutely. I think there was a lot of, at least from like the captain and veteran players, a focus to give the coaches that opportunity, because
Yep.
obviously that's sort of the like one of the main things a coach gets to do is we get to play War Masters.
Yep.
We get to bring whatever list we want. There's no real focus on like anything else. It's a fantastic time to just like try and go for that.
Yep.
When all right, cool, now we get to switch fully the coaching role for the teams.
Yeah. You get that little taste of the world scene, and then you go back into your role.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So talking about War Masters, then how did you find War Masters? Did you enjoy the entire experience?
Yeah, I loved it. It was crazy coming from, I think the largest event in Australia that I've been to in a singles format is Uprising, which was like 180
Wow.
or
Yep.
so people, maybe 200 people
Yep.
at like absolute peak, and now going into a 500-person event. The size, the scale, the caliber of player,
Yep.
it was fantastic. It was like super good, super
Awesome.
cool, and I recommend like anyone who was there like definitely should play. I think like if you're in Mecklen or nearby, it's such an awesome thing to be a part of.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I ended up only playing 4 rounds because I wanted to do some other stuff, but I had some of the best games I played at 40k personally, and just against great opponents as well. So just and also just playing against people you'll never play again, maybe ever again in your life, but also like people that you would never have played against unless you get to be there, and just seeing the different styles of lists and all that kind of stuff. I think it's
it was also, I think, really cool of playing any of the players and or coaches part of teams, which made an immediate like sort of like familiarity of like playing the South African coach round one, and then say hi to him during the event. Right, it's like, oh, like we played that game, like I now recognize you, we had a good chat, we had a good game. And so like those sort of like moments were also super valuable.
Yes. My round one was against one of the French coaches, and as soon as I was like, "Oh, you're a French guy," he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Oh, I'm one of the coaches for the French team." I was like, "Oh, dang!" So it was a hard game from the front, but luckily I was playing Tau into Grey Knights, and Grey Knights don't really have much of a game there, so I was luckily enough I was able to pull it out. But it was more, I think it was definitely more a list advantage than a player skill advantage, because he was a very talented player. So I was like, ooh.
Yeah, yes.
But again, exactly the same thing every time. I was like, "Oh, how's your round going?" It was I know that was one of the things that we did quite often as well, both being coaches, is we'll kind of come up to each other's games and be like, oh, so how'd you pair? It was like, you're kind of flirting every time. You're just like, oh, so like, how are you feeling? Like,
Yeah, how are you? Who's gone first? Who's gone second?
Yeah.
Oh, 6 of you have gone first. Oh, how good. I've got...
Yeah. So let's go into the actual event then. So WT starts Thursday afternoon. So you have 2 days of singles. Then you have like a morning off, which is the end of the singles, which is only played by the top bracket, the top cut. I think it was four armies this year.
Yes, top 4.
Yeah, top 4. So they play off, and so then you have the morning. You do your extra little bit of prep, and then game 1 starts. So it's a pod game. So this is one you'll be able to prep the most. You were seed 1 going into this, correct?
Yeah. So Australia was seed 1. Our pod was Malta, which was first up. And then which was our seed 4.
Yep.
Seed 3 was Norway, which we versed, or Norway or Denmark. I get those both confused.
Yep.
I think it was Norway. And then our seed 2 team was Italy, which is what we versed in the final game.
It was Malta, Norway, and Italy were your first two games. Yeah. No, cool. Oh, very well. So, did you feel very prepped going into the pod phase? Like, especially from the coach's perspective, how confident were you with your team going into pods?
So I think we felt pretty confident. We had brought, Australia was 6 new players, with the only real veterans being Jeremy Martino and Matt Marisoli.
Sure.
Dean Sinback, the captain, was a coach last year. So he'd sort of been in that environment, but he wasn't a player.
Yep.
I think a lot of people expected us to do not so great. Maybe we were going to lose or draw.
Yeah.
But we felt pretty confident going into our pod.
Nice.
So we were very much there to kick ass, and we knew that there were a couple problem lists going around.
Yep.
Across those teams that we had to make sure we managed. But yeah, we felt really good.
Yeah, 39ers is definitely something you have to pair around, right?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Well, the 39ers did, I think, it did very well in the pod phase. Did everything we sort of wanted them to do.
Yeah.
But it was definitely making sure we didn't underestimate 7 greater demons, because as we found out in the prep, that player had done incredibly well in the singles.
Okay. Yep.
Narrowly beating Innis, except for battle shocks and the secret mission.
Yeah.
Which is very impressive.
Yeah.
And then Norway had Crusher Stampede and Chaos Knights, which we had sort of left ourselves completely vulnerable to Chaos Knights, thinking no one in Europe is going to take them.
Yeah, sure.
And then we go to the one pod that has them.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, typical.
And then Italy has just a lot of strong players. They all of their lists were very well defined. There was nothing crazy they had, but everything was just you can see that every list was finely optimized.
Yes.
So this is going to be a very tough opponent. This was on, I think it was Purge, was round 3.
Yeah, Purge was round 3, I think. Yeah. So
it's this could be a very knife edge sort of game.
Yeah. Now Purge it's a very interesting one. So but you guys did very well. Round 1, that first day, you got 131 points out of 160. So really confident, really nice start to the event as well. Just cool. Yes. You kind of get the jitters out. You got a good scoring point game.
Very, very happy with that. The team was it was good, right?
Yep.
So, we can play the game. We're not sots here.
Yep. That's cool.
It's everyone's very good. We've trained for this. Yes.
Yeah. So as a coach, how was it dealing with the morale of the team? So going through the tournament, obviously you do very well through the entire pod phase, winning all 3 pod games. But how obviously when the team's winning, everything's a piece of cake, right? Because cool, you don't have to prop anyone up. But then out of pods you get a draw, right?
Yes. Yeah. So this was very close.
Yes.
We got the 85.
Yep.
There was a couple of mistakes on our end on some scoring where maybe if things were done, we could have won.
Sure.
But impossible. Hindsight's 20/20.
Exactly.
I think everyone was feeling pretty good though, because Spain is a tier 1 team.
Yep.
Spain is very strong, and obviously they came second. They did end up podium.
Yep.
So I think we took that into the fact that no one like wins everything.
Yeah.
Even the year Australia won, they drew against the USA.
Right.
It's like a draw. It's this happens, and even France had a draw. It's like everyone draws, so like we can still keep doing this. Like we're still in this. We're in a big way. So I think rallying around that was still pretty good.
Very good. Okay, so the team didn't get disheartened by the draw. They're like, cool, like we're still undefeated, we're still pushing forward, and it's just keep the gas going and keep going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the bigger moments was France.
Sure, yes.
Because in that was the game. So also after Spain reversed Austria, we felt very confident in their sort of list, and we had a couple of things go away in a few games that made us feel like, all right, that was one of the easier games as a coach of like as scores sort of trickle in and we're like, we've got this, right? Like projecting like an 87 now pretty comfortably. I think it ended up like a 90, 91. So we were like, fantastic, right? We've gone undefeated all the way to day 3.
Yes.
France was definitely the like, we knew they were a strong team. We knew they'd come to play.
Yes.
Boy, did they play.
Yes, they were cutthroat this entire tournament, right? Like every time they played someone, you talk to that team, the team that France played afterwards, and they're like, oh, like everyone was just playing as hard as they could for the entire 4 hours, right? Like,
yeah, absolutely. And I think that was, it is thankful in the coaching thing in that after that loss, we only had one more game. It's probably a lot easier to rally everyone, and everyone's just like, look, we've lost the game, but we can win the next one. We get like, let's just focus on that, rather than, you know, if we had lost that game earlier, that can sort of spiral into the other stuff. But a big thing that I and all the coaches did, Dalton, Lawrence, and Adam, was just having players like walk away. If they had a game that went really bad, if they, you know, I'm going to get a 10, they get a 0, it's like, just step away, get some fresh air. It's very hot in the hall. But it was just focus on the next thing. Like, it doesn't, a big thing that I think any successful team is that the team is not let down by a player. It's like, we are literally a team. You get the score, you get the score. Like, we learn from it, we move on from it, but we don't need players thinking about how they can improve or what they need to do. It's like, we just go to the next game. Like, whatever the result is, it is. There's no point thinking on how, what, when, why. We're just going to look at the next game ahead of us.
I can't remember which coach I was talking to, but it was last day and we were just chatting shit. And they said that one of their big things was short memories. After every round, win or lose, short memory. You don't want to keep the cockiness of winning a round, so you forget it. If you lose a round, again, you don't want that, like, oh, well, I've already lost a round. Like, you just forget it. I thought it was a really good mentality to have.
Yeah, I think it's really good there, and it's especially key for when things go good and bad on adjusting scores, right? I'm sure you would come across like, you know, some things went wrong. I thought I was a 12 in Necrons. I lost the game. Put me as a 6. It's all Necrons are bad. And it's like, is it a 6? Was that just this one instance? Was that the list, the mission? Like, so many factors. And in the same way, right? Someone gets like, I 20'd orcs. It was a 14. It's like, we don't want you putting 20 into every orc now. So keeping that short memory, like, let's stick to data. We can slowly adjust on new information, but trying to make sure that no one was doing like massive adjustments based on their personal performance. Because you've done the practice, you've done the reps, like, you should be able to like go with confidence.
No, I 100% agree with that. So instead of talking about your last round, I first want to talk about what you did during the round. So pairings happen. Were you part of the pairings table?
So I was not part of the pairings table. I was going around helping set up tables. Setting on like our half of the board. The main role I did was keeping track of scores.
Sure. Okay.
So I recorded all of what what was in our matrix,
Yep.
how everything had been paired, and then just trying to keep tabs of games on, are they still on track for the predicted? Where does that put us overall? And trying to do informative, like when do people need to push,
Yes.
when do people need to hold, and that was sort of the main thing that I did.
Yeah, nice. Yeah.
Which very intense, very stressful role nearing the end of a round. Very boring, just hanging around initially because I can't ask someone are they on track for the predicted round 2 when everyone's still just stationary on the midboard.
Yeah, I definitely had, after pairings was done, the first like 20 minutes of the round when everyone's touching all their models and stuff, I definitely had a bit of like FOMO where I was like, oh man, I really just want to like roll some dice right now. I was like, I definitely had that, like pretty much every round start. I was like, cool, everything's set up. Coaches have nothing to do for the first, 15, 20 minutes of a round. You kind of just sit there, and you're like, yeah, but...
I think a lot of, we did a lot of, like all of us, a lot of the busy work of like someone's got to go get a tray of water, like we're going to organize the tables, like clean up our sort of like tidy up our spot a little bit, like a lot of that as we're just sort of like let's just see how things go. Everyone sort of waits of like who went first, who went second, is that important for the mission, that sort of thing.
It was definitely more fun after like day 2 and 3 when after you've already talked to some of the other team's coaches, because as we alluded to, we went and talked to each other, but we also talked to all the other coaches that were kind of like played against before, and you're like, so like, what are you, again, the flirt comes back. I was like, so what have you predicted, what are you going to tell me, what are you not going to tell me?
I did that a lot with Malta.
Oh yeah,
because Malta only had one coach, and they were absolutely lovely, and I went on to them quite a bit to give their coach, like, do you need anything?
Nice.
Like, I can sit here while you go and do some other stuff, so that they always had like their coach around the table.
Nice.
And every team that we versed, it was, you just get that bond, right? We're locked in this section of the hall for 4 hours. So after the round, I'm like, hey man, how are you guys going? Like,
awesome. Yeah, it's funny how quickly you make connections in 40k. Like, this is not even just at the WTC, but this is 40k in general, right? Like, if you play against someone and you have a good game, you've basically become friends for life. It's just this very bizarre thing that like happens at 40k.
100%. Because if I can hang out with you and in a 3-hour game and it's very enjoyable, I want to do that again. So it's like add to the contact list, like, absolutely.
Exactly. And I think it is exacerbated at WTC because everyone's there to have a good time. Everyone's there to compete well, but especially the coaches, like they want to have their good time, and their good time is a lot more based on the interactions, right? So I think that's like a great thing you can take away from if you're going as a coach instead of a player. Is like, hey, you might not get to play as much. You still get to play the War Masters, but you have this great chance to just talk to people from every single country and just make these amazing connections.
Yes, undoubtedly, right? Like, it's so good to be able to, like, you get to just absorb all of the games, watch how things go on, and you being that coach definitely gives you that sort of like, not like bird's eye view rather than like tunnel vision. I'm just playing this game. I just have to focus on what's in front of me. You get just incredible perspective of like what else is going on, how are other people doing it, and at the end of the day, right? Like, this is a hobby. It is a social one. Like, I myself got back into Warhammer like during COVID, right? Because I hated being locked in my house all the time, and like, I want something where I can just talk to a real person. And so that aspect of it is just, at WTC, it's all matched to the 10. The competitiveness, the emotions of it, but also that friendship and love and stuff is just incredible.
The pure just love for everything 40k at WTC was actually kind of blew me away. You kind of always get the perception that the more competitive players are a bit more intense, but I actually think like it was the complete opposite. They were the most like talkative, chatty people. If you ask them questions, especially after you've played them where it's not as valuable to them, they'll answer anything that you ask, which is like really nice. Like, definitely before a round, if you ask like one of the French players like, what would you do in this situation, they'll just look at you and probably just turn away. But after the round, that would be lovely. They're like, oh yeah, of course, this we thought you were going to do this, and then we did this. Right.
I think it's one of those interesting things of like, yeah, you think like they'd be a lot more uptight and more stressed and all that, but then you think like, what does it take to get here? Like hundreds, thousands of hours of Warhammer, constantly talking with people. It's like self sort of like you probably don't make it all that way, right? It's the people that are just so enthusiastic and filled with like all the hype that really get to it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is a very fun time. So after the event, we actually met up and traveled for a little bit. We had a pretty good time. We did a canal cruise together. The after event, so obviously there's a big party on the Sunday night at the end of the event. Everyone goes out, has some beverages, which is lovely. That was at Bar Popular.
Yes.
And so what was the after WTC experience like?
So I think it's for me a lot of emotions, a lot of like so like for Australia, we ended up placing 11th, and you guys placed 9th. How dare you? But it's like that isn't the story, right? Like the story was we went into day 3 undefeated. We fought France, and if we beat France, we potentially come first. Then we played Poland, and if we beat Poland, as Poland came third, like we would have come third. We had those shots, and it's heartbreaking to be pushed to 11th, but it's so encouraging. Like we actually came so far. Like we did so much. We beat a lot of high caliber teams. We versed every single team on the podium, and we versed like 5 of our 7 opponents were in the top 10.
Yes, yeah.
Me personally, I was just running dry. I was just like, I'm so tired. I've been on my feet like 7 days. That's not what I normally do in my day-to-day life. And so I was pretty exhausted. So I think I came to Bar Popular, hung out for an hour, and I'm like, I need to go to bed. And so after that, I think there's a lot of chats of like what could have been in a loose sense, not really beating ourselves up, but like we were close. We were so close. Matched with, dude, we were so close. Like how awesome is that? And I think afterwards was sort of just trying to like separate a bit. Like we've just spent 7 days thinking of Warhammer, doing all of this, and I'm like, all right, I've got all my merch, I've swapped all my shirts, they're all in my suitcase. Like I'm gonna go on this little holiday before I head back home, and I'm just trying to embrace that. And you know, we had our little canal ride. I was fully in control.
You were the entire time.
The entire time, I was a master of my own mind.
Yes, you were.
And so
that's cool.
That was. I think if I could recommend to anyone who does go, I think taking at least a couple of days afterwards while you're there is super important. I think the people who have been there time and time again, cool, they do the event, they fly immediately back home. But you know, I valued very much being able to be like, I'm now just on vacation. Because it, as much as it seems like it's a vacation, right, and a lot of fun, a lot of joking and stuff, it really wasn't. Like,
it's a lot of work. Like, it's straight up a lot of work.
Wake up 7, have breakfast, go to the hall, come back at like 8 p.m, chat with the team, go to bed at 10, repeat. 7 days, just like doing this. And it's like, I love Warhammer. And I've come home and I've already played 2 games since I've been back. But even that was a lot for me.
Yeah, it's like, especially when you said I've been on your feet. Like, I think I have the the watch that counts my steps. I was at like 18 to 20,000 steps a day, which was just it was rough. Like, my feet were sore. Like, I ended up having to like wear 2 pairs of socks. Like, I was actually like physically exhausted at the end of it, which doesn't seem like what should happen at a 40K event, but you really are. Like, you are actually completely tapped out, and you just need that break. And I 100% agree. A couple of days, wherever you want to go. Like, a bunch of Team New Zealand went to Germany straight after. I went up to Amsterdam, and ironically walked into you, and then we decided to and it was just really nice. And you do see that, like, on my train ride up to Amsterdam, I met up with the just accidentally walked into John Lennon, Andrew Gagnon, and Eric Forsman from Team USA, and ended up yarning on a train for a couple of hours as I went to Amsterdam. Then went our separate ways. Like, there's no other place in the world that that's going to happen, right? So like,
I saw a bunch of like the Italian team when I was in Amsterdam as well. Like, 100%. Like, I think people are just like doing that sort of travel, and it's fantastic to have those connections outside of this, right? It's like, it's not just the WTC sort of thing. It's like easily recognized to everywhere else when you see them, and it's really cool.
Yeah. I generally think I've added like 30 friends on like Facebook, like just post event, which is just crazy to think about, right? Like,
absolutely.
Yeah.
It's fantastic if I ever want to travel to an event or something, like I can hit up this French coaches. I can go like, hey man, is there like a French tournament of this, like meeting people in Canada, like all over the place, right? It's like so cool to now have those contacts as resources. Be like, hey, I want to go on a trip to France. Like, can you recommend any places to like actually go that isn't just a tourist trap? Like,
yeah. Even just like being able to like, this is being a bit more like on theme for being a coach is, these are people I can contact for next year to talk about like, hey, like 6 months out of WTC. Hey, what's like the middle like looking in France or wherever, like just actually being able to get like a little bit of data that's more focused on someone that's obviously a very good player as well. You don't usually become a coach unless you are also a very good 40k player.
Yeah, 100%, right? And I think it's like, that mutual respect like goes both ways, and it's such a valuable thing to like actually be like, hang out and stuff, and
no, exactly. So we'll finish this off. Is there anything you would like to say about your entire over your entire experience? What are like the key points, your key takeaways, and like closing thoughts on being a coach for Team Australia?
I think so. My key takeaway that is very important to me, but I think it's very weird when I explain it, is what makes WTC so awesome is that you can have such incredibly strong emotions. This is like the pinnacle of what the thing is, and it's so rewarding to feel the lows and the highs because they're just so strong, right? Like, if you win your local tournament, that's a really good feeling. If you lose, it's like, that sucks, but it's just the weekend RTT, and this is just magnified. All the games are so intense, like it's such high level play. The feeling of just scraping the win, the feeling of edging out that draw, and then the feeling of losing, it's just like, it's so cool to experience such high level emotions, right? That like, where everything is sort of on the line. And I think it's just incredibly valuable to have that.
It's amazing, especially as a team, right? Like, because you're not feeling those emotions yourself, like in a singles environment. If you lose, like, oh well, but like you lose as a team, you draw as a team, you win as a team, right? Like, it's just
everyone's there to comfort each other. Everyone's there to like shout and chant when you win. Everyone's willing to call someone an absolute Chad if they won by 1 point, and that causes the victory. And I think from that, as a coach, I think from the very outset, there's a perception that like the coach role is, you're just there to get water, you're just there to like carry people's armies and set up tables, and that is part of the role, but that's not actually the role. The role is your support staff, and you're supporting the players, and like that's just incredible experience and an incredible to be a part of it, right? Coaches are absolutely part of the every team, and every team always takes coaches. The only teams that do not take coaches are teams that are unable to like actually take them.
Physically get the amount of players.
Most teams will always bring 4 coaches, and as we saw with places like Germany and USA and others, if they can take more coaches, they will take more coaches.
Yes, I think USA had 20 support staff, like 20 like players total. Like, so like there was 12 support staff. There was 2 social media managers. They had 2 people that are just fearing to get food. They had 1 person to go back and do laundry. Like, they just had everything. Like,
exactly, right. And it's like, they wouldn't do that if that wasn't valuable. And so being a part of it is fantastic. And I think, I would highly encourage, like, if you're able, like, to go to WTC and strive for it, It's just such an incredible experience.
Yes. Nah. Very cool. Well, thank you very much for coming on today. Do you have any shout outs you want to do or anything like that?
No, I think no. That's all from me. It's. Thank you very much for having me on, Chris. Hopefully, we'll catch up in NZ soon. And
Yes. Yeah, we actually still haven't played yet, so we actually need to get a game in. So whether it's at an event or before or after.
I love the Tau Votan match.
Oh,
how thrilling!
Like, who has bigger gun? Yes.
Who is faster? Oh, the Tau does. How cool!
How fun is that? Excellent. Thank you very much, Ollie. You have a great night, and to everyone else, catch you guys later. Bye.